loan, but they could turn around and hedge some of the risk if they were, let's say, full up on that particular credit. And this was not necessarily, I think it's important, this is not taking a view. It's not saying we don't like the credit. This is simply saying that there's a certain amount of risk to any one entity that we can take, and via the credit default swap market, we will be able to get rid of any excess over and above the amount that we're prepared to take. So in many cases, banks still take the credit risk, portion of it, and they shift another portion of it. It's not banks saying, oh, I'm going to give out as many of these loans as I can because I'm going to like the credit risk, but I don't care because I'm going to move it all through the credit default swap market. That was not the driver originally. That may have occurred later. That's not how they started.
Talk about the evolution, how you got into teaching about credit default swaps, training organizations to be able to utilize them, and what the scope of your work is about.
Well, we've been operating for almost 6 years, actually, and the credit default swap market, I guess 6 years ago, in 2004, the credit default swap market was really just taking off, really growing exponentially in 2004. And up until then, so I've been in the credit default swap market from the mid-'90s way through the origination of the product, through to the standardization of it, through to the development and innovation of other products, and eventually to what it was considered it became considered a much more standard or common commoditized product, if you will. In 2004, I decided to set up a business which did education on credit default swaps. At the time, I realized that banks banks in general were the only ones providing education, anyone in the financial community, about these products, and that was because it was still a very new product. The expertise lay almost entirely within the banking community, and as a result, any investors or third-party entities looking to get involved in the credit derivative market ultimately were relying upon the banks themselves for their education and knowledge about the product. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but there certainly could be some moral hazard, some moral hazard around if you're the only one that knows about it and you've got it to sell, and you're out there educating, then you're performing perhaps too many functions. The timing for me was personally, I just had my first child, and I was looking for a slightly different approach to my lifestyle. And so I left the floor, and I immediately got a bunch of phone calls to educate and help different entities, consult with them on the products, derivatives, various securitization products, CDOs, etc. And very quickly became evident that there was a huge demand for knowledge around this product. In fact, demand that I myself just couldn't service entirely. I was flying all over the world, and I was working completely crazy hours, crazier than the trading floor. And I knew I needed some business partners, and I was able to recruit two fantastic business partners, both of whom had been with me at J.P. Morgan and helped to develop different aspects of the credit derivative market. One of whom is on the phone with me now, Betsy Mettler. She runs the New York office. Another is here in London, Anu Munshi. And we, together, we've managed to pull in other former colleagues, who have different amounts of expertise, and we do a tremendous amount of education. And it's surprising that even today, when there are so many people involved in the credit derivative market, that there is still demand for knowledge about this product. Both the banks as well as the the investors who have been involved in these products. And we educate a number of different levels of people. We educate salespeople to make sure that they're telling the right thing to their clients. We educate investors. We educate a lot of, I'd say maybe 40 to 50% of our training is operations people in banks who are looking to actually book these products and manage the products through their life, manage the cash flows over the maturity of the product. Many credit default swaps are 5 years in maturity, so although you do the trade today, it's in the bank system for the next 5 years, so there needs to be someone who's managing those cash flows and make sure that it's all happening accurately.
I have a quick question about something that you just said about you do the trade today. What does the trading have to do with the credit default swap? I'm confused.
Well, any time you enter into a credit default swap, we would call that a trade.
Okay.
Simply. So I have traded or I have executed a credit default swap because it's an instrument. It's like saying world of equity, so I bought some stock or I sold some stock. You could also very easily say I traded some stock today.
Oh, okay. I got you. It's an internal reference. You were on an interview where you spoke about a conference that you did in 2005, cautioning that audience about irrational exuberance. I thought it was interesting. Can you share that with the public?
It's a funny story. So I was on a panel conference in France on securitization and structured credit products. And there were maybe about 1,000 people there from various different banks and institutional investors. And I was on a panel, I was chairing the panel, and we were talking about some correlation products, some really exotic products. In fact, that panel was the driver of a recent book that came out called Fool's Gold, when the author Gillian Tett was actually in the audience, and she was listening to this panel, trying to figure out who all these people were and what products they were talking about, because they were all relatively new products. They were still very young in their life cycle. The panel was made up of a bunch of traders of credit default swaps at different banks. And one of the questions I posed was, it seems as if everybody is getting involved in products. Everybody, all hedge funds, all institutional investors, everybody wants to be involved in the structured credit market and trade credit derivatives and trade structured credit correlation products. And as a result, much more demand for credit risk than supply, and as a result, spreads are tightening. And doesn't it feel a bit like rational exuberance, like mirroring the comments that Greenspan used to make in the mid-'90s about the stock market? And I laughed when I said it, thinking, what were they going to say? And it was a huge amount of feedback that I got off of the back of that comment, because the woman who was in the audience who wrote the book Fool's Gold, she is a journalist for the FT, and she wrote an article, front page of the FT, quoting me, stating that there's irrational exuberance in the market. And I got a huge number of people calling me up, to some extent chastising me, saying, you can't say stuff like that. You can't say that there's irrational exuberance. You're going to scare people away. We're trying to raise money in the structured credit market. How could you possibly say that there's irrational exuberance? It makes people nervous when you say stuff like that. And at the time, I was a bit worried that I had gone off and made this statement, and I thought, goodness, should I be a bit more careful about what I say? But the facts are the facts. I felt, and I guess my statements have panned out to some extent, because ultimately there was irrational exuberance, but it wasn't noticed in 2005. It was noticed sometime in 2006, 7, and 8. But that provided a bit of entertainment for a little while.
Question about the